Like, good day, everyone. Today we are on our 11th session of Learning Basic Arthroscopy series. Today we have a renowned arthroscopy surgeon, Dr. Clement Joseph from Chennai, India. And we have Dr. Alex Weissman from Clinica Alemana, Chile, who has agreed to stay with us as our invited guest. And also we have Dr. Srinivas and myself, Dr. Sasinda. So we are thankful to you for accepting our invitation, sir. We are on our 11th session of. Welcome, sir. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Shashi. Thanks for your wonderful effort. And Dr. Alex Weissman, welcome to the webinar. Glad to be part of this. And for Srinivas, let's go to this. I think you have to enable my screen sharing, Shashi.
Walk through that. Done, sir.
So here we go. All right. Okay, so this talk is going to be on the technique of remnant preserving ACL reconstruction. So before I go into the technique and details, let's see how good we are in our ACL reconstructions. If you look at this slide here, you may know that 30% of ACL reconstructed patients are not able to return to sport. Re-injury rate is quite common, up to 23%, especially in younger athletes. And re-injury rate is more in those who return to high level of sports. And the re-injury risk is 30 to 40 times. A lot of people have some sort of quadriceps weakness, and in the long term, OA risk is also becoming more. So the last decade, we were focusing on anatomical ACL, single bundle and double bundle, etc. But now we are focusing more on restoring the anatomy and the native biology of ACL. We are also looking at patient-specific protocols, like choosing the right graft for the right patient, and also adding adjuvant procedures like an extra-articular procedure or an osteotomy in some cases. So what is a remnant? Many times we may have come across pictures like this when you do arthroscopy, where the MRI reports as a complete tear, you can still see some part of ACL is stuck or a good amount of tissue is remaining. The remnant refers to the remaining tissue in a completely torn ACL and also includes the remaining bundles, the intact bundles in cases of partial tears. Coming to the partial tears, they can be asymptomatic and they could just stretch out to become a symptomatic elongation of the native ACL, and the partial tears could also involve a rupture of one or two bundles. The mechanism of injury of an anteromedial bundle is an explosive type trauma, mostly in an anterior direction, while a posterior lateral bundle is injured in a typically a low velocity pivoting injury. Zantop in his series found out 75% of his cases to have a complete rupture of ACL, and partial injuries were observed in 25%. Noyes reported 28% incidence of partial tears, and symptomatic single bundle tears were reported in 5 to 10% of cases by Seibel and Few. In this series of nearly 416 patients by Colombe and Dijon, they observed complete tears in 50%, and they found in 23% the ACL remnant was healed to PCL. They were able to find out an intact PL bundle in 16% and an intact AM bundle in 11%. They also found out that intact bundles could either be functional or non-functional. They also found out that the intact PL bundles are more likely to be functional than an intact AM bundles. The partial tears can present with non-specific symptoms like pain and swelling. The anteromedial bundle tears can have symptoms resembling a complete ACL tear with anterior instability, whereas the posterolateral bundle tears can allow nearly normal activity and normal day-to-day life, except maybe some instability during pivoting activities. On the clinical examination front also, the partial tears can exhibit subtle clinical signs. We may not be able to find out the classical Lachman or an explosive pivot shift in these cases. There can be a 1 plus or 2 plus anterior drawer or 1 plus or 2 plus pivot shift in these cases. And whenever you're coming across a presentation like this, you should develop a suspicion about the possibility of a partial tears in these patients. These partial tears can be identified in MRI as well. Typically, a partially torn ACL can look thinned out in an MRI with curvy fibers. In an acute injury, you can find out focal angulation of the ACL and also focal intrasubstance high signal intensity. In a chronic situation, the ACL may appear angulated and attenuated in caliber. And the radiologist may call a partial tear as a high-grade tear if there are any associated injuries like injury to meniscus, osteochondral injuries, bone bruises, and there is an absence of a bundle. So these are the radiological features. As you can see on the left image here, there is a diffuse edema reflecting strain of an ACL, but the substance is intact here. The next image, you can see the fibers are not parallel to the intercondylar roof of the notch here. And also they appear to be thinned out and wavy in the proximal portion. And here in the third image, you can see the ACL fibers. Once again, they are not parallel to the roof of the notch, but rather seem to be stuck to the PCL here. And here you can see the anteromedial bundle fibers, which are parallel to the notch here. But as you go to the posterolateral aspect, you can find out the wavy fibers of posterolateral bundle, indicating some injury to the posterolateral bundle. So by careful analysis of MRI images, one can identify these partial tears and plan accordingly. The morphological patterns of ACL remnants in a complete tear were assessed by Crane et al. And they have classified the remnants into 4 types. In type 1, the remnant ACL was stuck to PCL. In type 2, the remnant ACL was stuck to the roof. In type 3, it was stuck to the lateral wall of the intercondylar notch. In type 4, there was absence of the remnant, hardly there was any remnant. But as you can see, this classification system was not including partial tears. Hence, Ochi and al. Modified it by adding posterolateral bundle tears and anteromedial bundle tears. What Crane et al. Found out in their observation was, as long as the ACL remnant was attached to PCL or the roof of the notch, it was able to give some sort of anteroposterior stability. The anteroposterior stability was much less when it was attached to the lateral wall. And obviously type 4 lesions never provided any sort of instability. So it can be inferred that the remnant, whatever it was, could offer some biomechanical stability. And this study by Nakami et al. Analyzed biomechanical function of ACL remnants, found out up to a year after ACL injury, these remnants can offer some sort of AP stability, but their contribution to rotational instability was much, much less. After 1 year, the remnant stability gradually deteriorated to become worse. This indicates that the remnants can have a function of providing some sort of biomechanical stability to the joint, even after injury, and probably this stability can help a graft if these remnants can be preserved. Same group in their study of 216 patients, when they did second look arthroscopy, found out in those cases in which they have done a single bundle augmentation and preserved the intact bundle, they had better synovial coverage and better proprioception than when compared to those who had a traditional ACL or a double bundle ACL reconstruction. So this finding indicates that the remnant can have some role in improving vascularity of the ACL graft and also improving better proprioception. So this is a blood supply of the ACL, and the study by Georgiolis have pointed out using MRI analysis of healing ACL graft, the revascularization of the intra-articular portion of the graft takes place early. Within a few months, the vascularization is complete, whereas the revascularization of the intra-osseous portion takes very long time, even up to 1 year. So you can infer from this finding that the structures within the joint, like the ACL remnant, can contribute to the revascularization of the ACL graft in a healing scenario. Similarly, a lot of studies have found the presence of mechanoreceptors like Pacinian corpuscles, Raffinian organs in ACL reconstructions, and they are found even after 3 years after an injury. So probably the remnant can have a role in proprioception and also in re-innervation of the ACL graft following surgery. So it's important to preserve the remnant because it can improve the biomechanical stability. It can provide increased vascularity, thereby better healing of your grafts. And it can also improve the proprioception so that the stability and coordination can be better in the ACL reconstructed knees. So coming to the treatment of ACLs with remnants, repair of ACL could be considered as some sort of remnant preservation. If you find the presence of an intact bundle, the injured bundle can be selectively reconstructed. When you can't find a functional bundle, probably you may have to go for the traditional ACL reconstruction, in which you would try to preserve as much remnant as possible. You won't debride unnecessarily on the femoral aspect or on the tibial side. And in cases where the remnant is present, but it is very loose, sometimes we have done reattachment or retensioning of the remaining ACL substance as well. So this is a working classification. The partial tears comprise group 1. Sub A is PL bundle is torn, subgroup B where AM bundle is torn, and subgroup C where you can't identify the bundle at all. The group 2 comprises of a complete tear, and subgroup A where the remnant is stuck to PCL, subgroup B where the remnant is stuck to notch, and C where there is no remnant. So this is something like a working classification, which you can classify the injuries and plan accordingly. Coming to the ACL primary repair, a lot has been discussed about ACL, but one should not be too enthusiastic about carrying the repairs because of the possibility of failure. Typically, they will help you if the tear location is in proximal portion, especially there's a Sherman classification, the type 1 lesions and type 2 lesions, where the tear occurs close to the femoral insertion and within the first 20% of the ACL are amenable to repair. And acute tears, pediatric patients, and partial tears in an acute scenario or the right lesions where one can do repair. And when you try to preserve the remnant, there can be certain downsides. You can have difficulties in identifying the footprint anatomy of ACL, both on the femur as well as on the tibia. And because of that, you can end up putting faulty tunnels. And as you are making tunnels, you can actually end up damaging the remnant. It can be technically challenging for a beginner surgeon. And if you leave out a floppy ACL remnant, it can fall back and produce a cyclopic lesion, which can restrict your full extension. So these are the pitfalls one has to be aware of when you're trying to preserve your ACL remnant in cases. Coming to an arthroscopy, you have to determine the lesion, whether it is a complete tear or a partial tear, and one has to identify which part the remnant is attached to. And one has to identify if there is an intact bundle, and then is the bundle functional. Typically, the anteromedial bundle is examined in around 60 to 70 degrees of knee flexion. The posteromedial bundle is usually taught in extension, but it may be difficult to examine the bundle near extension. So ideally, you can put a figure of 4 position, then examine the posterolateral bundle in these cases. Typically, hamstring are my preferred choices because you can use a triple graft when you want to do a single bundle augmentation, and you can use a quadruple graft when you want to go with the traditional quadruple semi-T reconstruction. One may also consider using quadriceps tendon. Some surgeons have described remnant preserving ACLs with BTB grafts, but we have no experience of using BTB graft in this scenario. Coming to the femoral tunnel tub tips. Ideally, the ACL reconstruction for a remnant preserving surgery, the leg can be kept on table so that you can really hyperflex the knee and do a ACL reconstruction. A low anteromedial portal is used for making the femoral tunnel. To prevent damage to the remnant, I use a technique called reamer first technique, in which a small size reamer, a 6 or 7 millimeter reamer, is kept where exactly you want your tunnel to come. And then by keeping the reamer in this position, a guide wire is passed through the reamer into the femur. Then the reamer is reamed over the guide wire. So we can make exact tunnel where we want without damaging the nearby remnant. And if there is an intact PL bundle, you may want to do an AM bundle augmentation. Here on the first picture, you can see this is where typically you may want to put your tunnel, which is in the location of the AM bundle footprint here, just behind the residence bridge. Typically, if you want to describe in clock position, it would be around 10 to 10:30 position. On the left knee, it would be around 1:30 to 2 o'clock position. In cases where AM bundle is intact, but PL bundle is torn, you may want to put the tunnel not exactly in the PL bundle location, but slightly towards the central location. Because as we noted from Dejo's study, the intact AM bundle is more likely to be non-functional in case if the intact AM bundle is slack. This central position can compensate for some of the laxity in the remaining anteromedial bundle. And if you're sure that whatever remaining bundles are not functional, you may want to go for the traditional ACL tunnel on the femur. But just to make it without damaging too much of the remnants. So these are the technical challenges and tips on making femoral tunnel here. And coming to the tibial tunnel, in almost all the cases, the tibial footprint is fully covered by ACL. So it may be difficult to identify the landmarks like tibial spine in these cases. So one tip would be to split the ACL footprint using a 11 knife introduced through a portal. And then one can use tip aiming or elbow aiming device, which has got a single prong like this, which can be inserted into the split. Sometimes you may have to debride the fat pad to have a clear view. And one should not make a too anterior tibial tunnel in these cases. If you're going to do a selective AM bundle reconstruction, the typical tibial tunnel should be around 4 to 5 millimeter from the medial tibial spine, and it should also be 4 to 5 millimeter posterior to the anterior frame of ACL. If you're doing a PL bundle alone, your tunnel should be 4 to 5 millimeter from the lateral tibial spine, and it should be 4 to 5 millimeter anterior to the posterior root of lateral meniscus. In this case, one should try to come slightly more towards the center to avoid damaging the posterior root of lateral meniscus. So we'll go with an example of this case. This is a 30-year-old person who presented with an ACL injury, grade 2 Lachman test, an anterior royer. And here one can see the PL bundle is torn and an intact AM bundle was found. So gentle debridement is carried out. Now you can see a 6 millimeter drill bit is kept in the PL footprint. The 2.4 millimeter guide wire is passed through that. And now the reamer is drilled over the guide wire. Now the knee is flexed at around 120 degree. Now the over reaming is done with sequentially increasing diameter. Now the 4 millimeter spade tip is introduced to the socket and drilled to the outer cortex. The Debond loop is taken and parked. Now you can see the ACL footprint is covering the entire tibia. A split is made using 11 blade and it is spread using a hemostat like this. And this will serve two purposes. When you're reaming, this split will allow the reamer to come inside so that inadvertent damage to the ACL graft can be avoided. It will also help you to keep your jig in correct position. Here I'm using a different jig. You can see the wire is coming out. Now the wire is protected. It's very important when you're reaming, as you're coming near the cortex, you have to use a hand reaming so that you won't damage the ACL remnant. As you can see here, most of the time you won't be able to see the tibial reamer coming out. You have to depend on the feedback from your hand. And now the loop is taken out. Once again, it may be difficult to retrieve it through the tibial footprint. You can see the grasper is coming through the substance of the ACL, and then it is taking the loop inside. Now the graft is being taken inside, the button goes and gets flipped, and this is the graft going inside. Now, since the graft has gone through the substance, you can see the remnant ACL is nicely covering the graft like a sleeve. You can see the entire graft is surrounded by the native ACL remnant without any floppiness, and we can avoid cycloplegion if the sleeve of remnant ACL is tightly fitting the graft, and there is no anterior impingement as well. So we'll go to the next case, a 23-year-old female who had a two-wheeler accident and presented with ACL and medial meniscal tear. Where on examination, she had pivot grade 2 and Lachman grade 3. Here you can see the MRI. Clearly, the ACL is torn proximally and it is lying flat. So because of the grade 2 Lachman and the nature of the MRI finding, we can infer whatever remnant is there inside is probably non-functional. So in this case, we decided to do an ACL reconstruction along with remnant reattachment procedure. Here you can see once again a similar picture here. Most of the PL bundle is gone, and whatever AM bundle was remaining is not very healthy. And it's very important to clear the area so that I can keep the 6 millimeter reamer as a guide. So this will help me to make the tunnel exactly where I want to be. And the reaming is done sequentially. And you can't avoid damaging some aspects of the remnant here. And once the femoral tunnel is made, the tibial tunnel is created here. Now the 4 millimeter spade tip reamer is gone. Now you can see we are placing 2 Ethibond loops in the femoral tunnel, and one of the loop is taken out through the tibial tunnel, and one loop is taken out to the portal. Now I am coming to the joint with a scorpion passer. We are passing number 0 fiber wire into the remnant. Multiple passes are made through the ACL remnant. The multiple passes will help prevent cut through. If you are using a single passes, sometimes it can easily rip out of the graft. Now, the number 0 fiber wires which have been passed through the ACL stump are taken out through the tunnel, and using the other Ethibond loop, the graft is pulled into the femoral socket. Now you have the graft which is covered by a retensioned ACL remnant. The 0 fiber wires which have been taken from the ACL remnant are tied to the white threads of the tightrope, which are the non-sliding arms, so that the ACL remnant is tightened over the ACL graft. So this is another technique which you can use if you find the original remnant is lax, loose, and non-functional. So something like a combination of reconstruction and a primary repair. So this is a picture of the patient. And I'll also show a primary ACL repair in a pediatric patient. This is, we are using internal bracing in these cases to protect your repair. And internal bracing may also be helpful if you are having thin graft and individuals who are at risk of early failures. And one concern is sometimes this internal bracing can have stress shielding effects, so they can prevent the graft from becoming fully strong. And going to the case is a 11-year-old male who had a football injury, presented with medial meniscal tear and ACL tear. He had Lachman 1+ and medial joint tenderness. So these are the MRI pictures here. And these are the arthroscopic images. You can see the ACL was almost looking intact, but for the clinical laxity, because he's a young patient, we tried to do a repair, and you can see a 2.4 millimeter guide wire is coming from the tibial footprint. The same track a spinal needle is introduced, through which an Ethibond suture is introduced to the joint. Then using a 2.4 millimeter bead pin, a tunnel is made from the femur to the outer femoral cortex and then outside thigh. Here you can see this is a 2.4 millimeter bead pin coming from the medial portal through the femoral footprint and out like this. And before you take the thread out, we pass a cannulated drill over the guide wire so that we'll know the depth of from the skin surface to the femoral cortex. This is very, very important. I will explain why. Once we know the depth of the skin to the femoral cortex. Then the ethibond loops are taken out. The next step would be to modify your adjustable loop button. Normally, the adjustable loop button comes with a 5 centimeter loop like this, which can be elongated to 10 or 15 centimeter. This long loop you have made. This loop is loaded onto the ethibond sutures here, and it is taken out into the joint along with another vicryl loop. Here you can see the loop is taken into the reverse position. You can say because we know the depth at which the cortex is below the skin level, the same depth is marked here, so that we know that if you're reaching this mark, which is the skin, we know that the button is exactly sitting on the cortical bone, not on an IT band or any other soft tissue there. So that's why we measure the depth over the guide wire using the cannulated drill bit. Now the button is pulled inside. Now the button is resting on the femoral cortex. Now the loop is taken out through the tibial footprint. Now to retension the remaining ACL, we are using a scorpion suture passer to pass multiple zero fiber wires into the remnant ACL, which is loaded into a vicryl loop, which is placed in the femoral tunnel. Now you can see the internal brace is tightened by applying an ABS button to the loop, which is outside the tibial bone here. Now, as the cinching sutures are tightened above, you can see the loop gets shortened, pulling the button towards the tibial bone. Now you can see I am taking the fiber wires from the ACL tissue and tying with one of the wide sutures of the tightrope. These are the non-sliding arms. Once again, the depth marking is very important so that we know that the knots are placed exactly on the bone, not on any other soft tissue. To improve the healing of the medial meniscus, in this case, medial meniscus repair, we are doing a microfracture drilling as well. So this is a post-op X-ray of this patient. So to conclude, ACL is a spectrum of injury. Not all ACLs are same. One should be able to identify partial ACL injuries clinically as well as radiologically. And if possible, one has to prepare for a remnant preserving ACL reconstruction. Your clinical evaluation should be able to give you an idea whether the remaining bundle or remaining tissue inside the ACL is functional or non-functional. This technical procedure can be demanding, and especially you should avoid damaging the remnant ACL. And you can do all this technique, but if you are not experienced, don't do these procedures at the cost of accuracy and result. Go with the standard ACL reconstruction, which you are comfortable with. So with this, I conclude my talk, and thanks to Sasi and his team for organizing, and we'll open for discussion and questions.
Sasi, you need to unmute yourself, please.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much, sir. It was a very detailed presentation of some of the new concepts and techniques for preservation of the ACL when doing an ACL reconstruction. It was very detailed with a lot of evidence in relation to the outcomes of remnant preservation and in relation to the proprioception and the benefits of remnant preservation. I have a couple of questions before we go on to the question from the audience. Is there a way to be very clear as to whether the remnant part of the ACL is functional? It's only clinical. For example, there can be an MRI finding of a remnant ACL, but that could be stretched a lot. How can you be very sure that the remnant ACL is functional, it's good?
A functional remnant is one which exhibits a 5 millimeter or a 1+ Lachman or 1+ anterior Doyer. Anything more than that probably indicates it is stretched a bit. And typically, if you're having a 1+ pivot shift alone, it indicates that whatever PL bundle is remaining is functional. If you are facing 2+ pivot shift, especially under anesthesia, you can identify it being a non-functional. And you can once again confirm it arthroscopically as well, palpating in 60-degree knee flexion as well as a figure of 4 position for PL.
Okay. So you want to check the anteromedial bundle in extension, that is Lachman test, and posterolateral bundle in flexion, that is anterior drawer test?
Anteromedial bundle is tested in flexion, and PL bundle is tested near extension, 30 degree.
But,
Lachman is more, that is a standard teaching.
But AM bundle gets tightened in extension, right? AM bundle gets
No,
tightened.
it is tightened throughout the knee, and I think it's maximum in flexion, 60 to 70 degree.
Are there proprioceptive studies in relation to the outcomes of remnant preservation ACL?
Yeah. I quoted one by these people, Nakami group and all, in which they compared 3 groups of patients. A group who underwent bundle preserving augmentations and single bundle straightforward ACLs and double bundle. They found out the proprioception was better in the group in which they preserved 1 or 2 either one of the bundles. Yeah.
Okay. In your practice, do you try to do remnant preservation for almost all patients? Are there any specific indications, for example, athletic patients whom you want to do a remnant preservation?
Athletic people, I prefer bone tendon bone graft, but it's very difficult to do this technique with a BTB, even though it has been described. In that case, I may not go for a remnant preservation at all. But leisure athletes, I would do a remnant preserving ACL, but I would put a stronger graft. I won't put a 3 bundle, I would put a 4 bundle graft and then try to preserve as much as I can.
Okay. Dr. Alex Weissman, can give your opinion regarding remnant preservation?
Yes. First, I want to congratulate Dr. Clement for his wonderful talk. Excellent.
Thanks.
And I think that today we have enough information, clinical information, to say that to preserve a bundle, a functional bundle, is very important. I mean, it adds to the patient. Okay. There is a little more controversy when approaching a patient with a small stump. What to do there? Do we preserve it? Is the proprioception really preserved if there is a small stump there? If we do try to preserve it, just like Dr. Clement said, there are some technical pitfalls that you have to take care of. So I would say that when you have a remnant bundle, functional bundle, you always have to try to preserve it. When you have a small stump of the old ACL, the torn ACL, probably depends on your experience, because it always can jeopardize the place where you're going to put your tunnels. So if you have a lot of experience, if this is more technically demanding, I think that you can go for it. If you are just starting in arthroscopic surgery, you have to be aware of putting the tunnels in the right position. It's going to be technically more demanding. So that is what I do with my patients.
Okay. It is to be clarified that, I'm sorry, please go ahead, Dr. Alex.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask Dr. Clement, because for example, when we use a BTB graft, we usually have a diameter of the graft which is 10 to 11 millimeters in diameter, okay? So when you have a big graft, sometimes it's hard to preserve the remnant, because you, of course, with the reamer, you tend to damage what is left. So do you have any tips when using a big graft like a big BTB to preserve the graft and trying to get the aim on the position of the tunnel?
I have not done any remnant preserving technique with BTB, but the Japanese group, they have reported. And probably if you want to do BTB, probably I would like to keep your plug to a minimum as possible, like 8 mm. But in my opinion, the BTB success depends on your tunnel placement. And most often I find that if you are not having a proper orientation of your notch, you can make a wrong tunnel, you can have blowout, and you can compromise your BTB. So
Yeah.
for BTB, I need a clean notch, clean vision. I plan my tunnels properly, and I don't go for remnant preservation personally with BTB. You can have a lot of problems.
I totally agree with you. Thank you.
Okay, so for the learners, it is to be clear that they should not attempt into a remnant reservation and compromise on the stability that they possibly could get with a proper standard ACL reconstruction. So once they are experienced, they can very well proceed. That is what Dr. Clement and Dr. Alex do point out. Okay, I have a question to Dr. Clement. Sir, you said, for example, the stump preservation where you wanted to pass a new graft and then reattach the remnant to the femoral side. Okay, you said that you are stretching the wires, fiber wires of the attached remnant to the white thread of the tightrope. How do you do that? It is by mini open on the lateral side, or?
No. What I do is, as the guide wire is coming out, I enlarge the skin incision.
Okay.
And then I also, just like how you dilate your shoulder portals, I pass a 4 mm cannulated reamer on top of the guide wire so that I create a track there. And because I pass both the ethibond loops in the same go, I know that they are going to be the same soft tissue track.
Yeah.
And I also know the depth to which I can go inside because I measure it. So I just tie it on the top. But if you are not dilating the soft tissues around the guide wire, you can have difficulty in taking the knot inside. Okay. So just we are using some shoulder principles here.
Okay. Okay. Fine. There's one more question I have. In the case where you braced the ACL, you applied an internal brace. Do you give some laxity for the brace?
In this case, because it is a repair, I didn't give any laxity because we are not put any graft. But if I'm adding an internal brace along with the ACL reconstruction, for example, a 7 mm graft, I want to, so I would always give little laxity so that it will have a seat belt like effect. When the graft fails, you know that your internal brace is there to take care of it. So I want to prevent the stress shielding effect there.
Yeah. How do you, for a ACL reconstruction, how do you do the laxity? Just with a probe, you just stretch it a bit?
For bracing?
For the bracing, along with an ACL reconstruction, how do you do the laxity? You just stretch it a bit with a probe?
Yeah. When you try, you can put a small drill bit or something inside and tie on top of it.
Okay.
Yes, Sasi, regarding the internal brace, it's very important that the fiber tape or whatever strong tape you use for bracing is not more tense than the graft itself. Otherwise, it won't be working like a belt, like Dr. Clement said. So usually when we use a button, adjustable loop button, we fix the brace first, but before pulling the graft all the way. So that way you make sure that the tension of your graft is always going to be a little bit more strong than the tension on your brace. That can be that's a typical question that arises, that how much tension do you give to the brace? It's you have to see it case by case. There's no cooking recipe for this. Okay, so it might help to tense the graft at the end after fixating the tape, the brace.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point, Eric, because I think for this technique, do you over-ream your femoral tunnel socket? Do you keep your femoral socket longer than is needed so that you can tension the graft at the end?
Usually, it's not that we do the femoral socket longer, but we do a mark on the graft 5 millimeters shorter than the tunnel. So we pull with the adjustable loop, we pull the graft into the tunnel, and we leave, instead of taking it all the way to the top of the tunnel, we leave 5 to 10 millimeters of distance. So then with the brace, and then at the end, we pull the adjustable loop and pull it a couple more millimeters inside the tunnel.
Okay, that's a great technique. And for the audience, what Dr. Alex says is you keep pass the brace from the button along with the graft, right? The internal brace is attached to the button.
Yes.
And once you
loop, exactly
to the loop, okay. And then you fix on the tibia, the length of the internal brace remains constant. Then you pull the cinching sutures, the graft becomes more tight. Excellent, excellent technique.
Yes, and there's another tip that might help when you do ACL reconstruction with an adjustable button. In the small skin incision in the femoral side, you know, where the strings go out of the skin, you can insert your arthroscope and you can follow the sutures and up to the button, and you can clearly see the IT band. Okay. And you can clearly see if the button is on top of the IT band or if it's under the IT band. So it's a good, I do it in all my cases to be sure that I'm not letting the button on soft tissue.
Okay.
Dr. Srinivas, do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Clement. That was a very wonderful and educative presentation. Do you know, in most of your cases, you know that the patient has a partial injury or a complete injury of the ACL, isn't it? So are you prepared in most of the cases that the patient has a partial and or a complete injury? And what is there any difference in the placement of your portals for a partial injury compared to a complete injury of the ACL?
Yeah, the portals are usually standard, but sometimes I may put a low anteromedial portal for the femoral tunnel. And regarding the preparation, you don't need anything more. So basically, you assess whether the bundle is functional or not, whether you're going to use a triple semity or a quadruple semity. So in that case, you may want to prepare the graft first and know the diameter, and then take the reamer and keep it whether you'll be able to make a tunnel without damaging the remnant ACL. Only thing is, if you want to tighten the remnant of ACL, probably you may need the devices like I showed, a Scorpion suture passer, or sometimes you can use a lasso suture passer from your shoulder set. So those are the things sometimes which may end up not having in our setup. But usually those things are usually lying around, so I don't make any separate precautions.
So if the remnant is attached on the femoral side, if it is attached to either the roof or the wall, you take down the attachment before you reconstruct?
Yeah, usually when it's attached to the PCL or to the roof, it may be an obstruction to your ACL surgery. So you have to just try avoid damaging as much as you can. But sometimes it comes in a way you'll end up damaging. In that case, at the end, I will see how it looks, whether it is falling anteriorly. There is always a risk of having a cyclops lesion, so just debride it. And if it's closely hugging the ACL graft, probably I would leave it at the end.
And if you have a remnant, how do you decide on the maximum diameter of the graft you're going to use?
Once again, depends on the functionality of the remaining bundle. If whatever is available is giving good function, 1+ Lachman or 1+ anterior flare, probably I would like to keep it and do a triple semity graft. If you have any doubt, I don't just go with my fancy remnant preserving. I try to do a proper graft inside. I want an 8 millimeter graft in these patients. So that is very important for success. And then try to preserve as much as you can. And if you're using an 8 mm graft, one technique would be you make a small tunnel and see whether you're going to encroach on the remnant. You can use your curette and try to move the tunnel away from the graft, scrape of the tunnel. And you can also use burr to eccentrically ream on one side. So these are small tricks you can do if you think that a larger diameter tunnel is going to encroach on the remnant. You can use curette, you can use burr, and then you can slightly shift the tunnels away from the remnant.
For a beginner, which bundle would you recommend doing, AM bundle or PL bundle?
Now, whichever is torn, you have to reconstruct. But when the PL bundle is torn, it may be challenging to do the surgery because you have to work behind the intact AM bundle, and it could be challenging. So what I would do for this, you want to preserve the ACL, okay, you split the ACL in the center and keep your jig nicely and properly. And first try to get your tunnels right. That's very important. It's no point in preserving the bundles then having a wrongly placed ACL graft. And then on the femoral side also, this reamer first technique will guide you very easily. If you can keep your reamer without impinging on the remnant, probably you'll be able to make your tunnels in that position. And if that position is okay with you, probably you should go away with it. And if you have any doubt, don't worry about the remnant. Go with the proper ACL reconstruction. That's what I would advise.
Okay.
So remnants can be preserved not at the cost of your result. That's a very important thing.
Yes, and Cyclops is an issue. So we need to make sure that there is no floppy remnant that is falling back and causing a Cyclops.
So Cyclops incidence is more than in a regular ACL reconstruction in this one. Do we have a number? What percentage?
We don't have a number, but I'm not aware of any studies. But there is always a potential possibility. If you leave behind more of this remnants and you also make an anterior tibial tunnel, you will end up having a bunch of tissue in front of your ACL graft, which is likely to lead to ACL. So it's very important to see how the graft and the remnant behave after fixing both on the femoral side, on the tibial side. If you notice any bunching up of the remnant in front of the ACL, probably you may want to debride it a bit to avoid this complication.
It's been described that the Cyclops is really the issue here. It's been described according to the different authors between 15 and up to 30%, but that is the description by the MRI or arthroscopically, not necessarily with a clinical translation of that. So only the 5 to 6% might have symptoms of the Cyclops. And of course, just like Dr. Clemens said, with a good technique, it's you can avoid most of the cases.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is the Cyclops and the Cyclops syndrome. So the Cyclops is the radiologically, that is MRI diagnosed Cyclops. Majority of them turn out to be asymptomatic, whereas the Cyclops syndrome is those people who land up in some sort of extension deficit or pain on the front of the knee. Okay, that's a very good point. Thank you. Dr. Clement, if your remnant is not long enough to reattach into the femur, but you have a significant stump of the remnant, but it is not long enough to reattach to the femur, is there something you can do about it?
If it's not reaching out up to the femur, probably I would just leave it, do the ACL reconstruction, and as you said, look whether it is floppy or not, then slightly debride it. That's what I would do. Try to preserve as much as possible, but it should not be flapping around.
Maybe if you are going through the remnant, it can get tightened and it doesn't flop around.
Sometimes you may have a little bit of a temptation to maybe we can stitch it with the graft, but we should not do too much now. Maybe for next year we should do all these things.
That was what I was thinking about. Maybe is there a way to stitch it to the graft, but is it really possible? Because you have to pass the graft and then sort of pass the scorpion to stitch it, but it can damage the graft.
Yeah, we know. And Dr. Alex, my question to you, and do you reattach the remnant in any of your cases?
That's a good question. No, so far, no. There is, of course, it's something that I am always questioning. There is evidence that you know that it works, that you can recover some proprioception, that the thickness of the graft looks better on the MRI, that the stability is okay, but it's technically more demanding. You need to have some specific instrument in the OR to achieve this, like the Scorpion, you know, passer, or the or like a lasso. So I'm currently not doing that, but I think that it's very interesting that it can be, it's technically demanding, but if you can achieve it, it's something good for the patient.
Thanks, Dr. Alex.
Dr. Srinivas, do you have any other questions?
Do you have any change in the settings of the shaver when you are shaving the, during the procedure?
No, not specifically. It's the same speed, but very controlled manner. I do.
Okay. I think it was a wonderful program. We really learned something new and something which is very much executable and which can bring a lot of good to the patient. I think we will close the session now. It was a wonderful session. Thank you very much, Dr. Clement, for agreeing to share your knowledge. Yes, Dr. Alex, please.
I'm sorry. First I want to thank Dr. Clement. It was a beautiful talk. Excellent. Congratulations. And I want to thank also Sassy for the invitation, the honor to be here with you guys. And hopefully we shared some knowledge with all the people, the audience at their homes. Huh? So good luck and keep the good work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Dr. Alex has a talk coming up on ACL repair. So we are looking forward to it soon. So thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for making it happen. Good day.
Thanks, Azim.
All of you. See you.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Dr. Srinivas, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, Sassy. Bye, Dr. Clement.
Bye, Dr. Alex.